Welcome to this evening's webinar with Nate Glanville, sharing how to master tattoo removal treatments with the PicoWay system. Nate is the founder of Eraze Clinic, which began in 2014 and set out to provide expert care and industry-leading results. He is committed to staying at the forefront of the laser tattoo removal industry and is fueled by excellence and innovation. As part of this evening's webinar, he will host a Q&A to answer all of your questions. Please add any questions into the Q&A box throughout his presentation and they will be answered at the conclusion. I'll now hand over to Nate to share his expert insights with you.
Hey guys, first up, thanks for having me and thanks to everyone tuning in tonight. I'll try and make it as interesting as possible. We'll run through some good laser stuff. I'll just talk you through, for those of you who don't know me, I run Eraze Laser Clinic with my beautiful wife, Georgia Mack, and I'll run you through how we started. So for me, tattoo removal started, I had a tribal armband tattoo. Got it when I was really young. It was sort of just picked it off the wall. There wasn't much to it. When I moved to the Gold Coast, I soon realized it was a very heavily tattooed scene and it just didn't fit in. You couldn't be walking around with a tribal armband. So I really wanted a Chicano sleeve, so a black and gray Chicano sleeve over the whole arm, but having a tribal armband right in the center of the arm was just prime real estate and it couldn't be worked in with that sort of tattoo. So all the tattooists I approached, they all said it couldn't be done. And back then, I'd never heard of tattoo removal. No one I knew had it, I hadn't seen it. This is before, I guess, Insta and stuff like that. There wasn't much on social media. So I was kind of thought I was stuck with it. But the tattooist actually recommended a guy he was using. And I did a little bit of research and tried to find like a local clinic and that sort of thing, but there wasn't much out there. Searched around, there was a hospital offering tattoo removal, but they didn't do much of it. And the whole sort of setup just seemed too hard. I really just wanted to get tattooed. So I went around to the guy's actual house who offered the tattoo removal, and it was full backyard setup. So it was full backyard tattoo removal at its best. The guy introduced himself. He went through it. He said, look, I don't have a license. It was in Queensland, there was a time when you could get away with 3B lasers. We called them 3B lasers, but they were tabletop lasers. They sat on the table, imported from China, I believe. They were low power, couldn't remove it, but it was enough. So I really didn't care. I just wanted to fade the tattoo. So I was like, it is what it is. So we did 3 sessions with that. Each session blistered up pretty bad, like a lot of blisters and things like that. I think we did them a month apart. We didn't leave much room in between, but it healed okay. And it faded enough. Like I only left, like I said, 3 sessions was about $500 back then, and was enough to get the tattoo. So got the new Chicano sleeve, but that idea, I guess, the thought of tattoo removal, it blew my mind that you could just take off a tattoo like that. I'd never seen a full removal or anything like that, but I guess that's where Eraze was perceived. Went home, told the wife all about it. We thought about it and we were running other businesses at the time. So the idea sort of just got pushed aside and we thought about it for a while, but fast forward a few years, we did our research, did all that sort of thing. I won't bore you with how we sort of got into it. But we started, that's our new thing now, but I'll bring you to where we started. We started off pretty humble. We went into a suite, like an upstairs suite. And the reason for that was it was just cheap rent, was easy to get by and low overheads. We didn't want anything in a shopping center. We were new to the industry. My wife had a beauty background, like Georgia had a beauty background. I was from total different industry. So it was all like pretty foreign to me. And this was the setup, like on the right, that's pretty funny now when you look at it, but that was our setup. We went in with we had the Korean cooler and then we bought a Korean laser, right? We did a fair bit of research. We'd never even seen an articulated arm laser. So we were pretty proud with this new setup. It was within our budget. And Mark, who sold it to us, the salesman, he was actually really helpful. He, like I did my licensing, but back then there wasn't the sort of training I guess you guys are getting now. Tattoo removal was new, so most people hadn't fully removed to tattoo removal that were training you. So Mark sort of talked me through lasers, how to understand what they do and the ins and outs. So like learned a lot from someone like that. Someone like that's very important when you're first starting out. But it was only a 532 and a 1064 laser, which got us going, it got us moving. We kind of thought like, yeah, there is color tattoos, but most is going to be black. And we were kind of told that sort of 1064 will fade colors a little bit, and then as we got into it, we realized that 1064 doesn't fade colors much. 532 does reds, yeah, but when you need to do colors and you're working with just a 532 1064, it's challenging. You can't really take on those color pieces. So we were saying no to a lot of work. And then the other issue we were having, it was 5 to 40 nanoseconds. I don't know exactly how you would call that laser, what pulse width it was, but it was definitely very thermal. And with thermal, as you increase energy or when you lean on the laser a little bit to try and get the good fades out of it, you increase risk of blistering, swelling, all those sort of things. Well, blistering is the main one. So we're getting quite a bit of blistering as we started to, I guess, lean on it. When you're a new clinic and you don't have before and afters, you're trying to produce the best before and afters and the quickest before and afters. Everyone wants their tattoo removal fast. So you kind of start to push it a little bit. So we learned skin response very quickly and what not to do and things like that with that laser. But for colors, the only option was either to upgrade to a newer laser, but at the time we didn't have the budget. We weren't doing many treatments when we started out. So we heard about die handpieces. This laser didn't actually have die handpieces at the time, but we were able to get an adapter that put on a die handpiece. And for those who don't know what a die handpiece is, just a handpiece and it shoots, well, it bends the beam through a die, a consumable die piece, and then converts 532 into 660 and 595, I think it was back then. And yeah, it did work. I mean, they did frost the skin. It's arguable if they actually faded greens and blues much. Not really. We never produced a full removal with it. But the thing I ran into very quickly, when we started taking on color pieces, I think I burned through the 660 in about 3 months. So you just choose through the die piece, and the die piece was very expensive back then. When I did my numbers, like for a business of what it was working out per treatment, we were basically running at a loss or we're breaking even on treatments with colors. So we knew that we couldn't stay with this laser. It was a good start, and we learned the ropes, and we started to get a little bit recognized, I guess, with that laser, but we couldn't keep going. And like you'll see in the pictures, we started off with a bit of skin too. We had IPLs and things like that and skin tightening, but that all moved on. So from there, we did the research. And at the time back then, Pico wasn't really around, I guess. Like the first gen was a little bit later than this. So there wasn't many options for colors. There was the ruby laser. When I did my research, the 694 seemed pretty good. There was 2 ruby lasers on the market. But this particular Italian laser had all 3 wavelengths. So I had a 1064, a 532, and then the Ruby 694, 30 nanoseconds. So for us, we're like, it can do everything. It can remove colors. It's a solid 6 nanosecond Italian laser. We were seeing clinics over in the States using it that were producing really good results. So that was one of the main reasons I steered towards this laser. And when we purchased it, the first thing I noticed, a solid 6 nanosecond from a good quality laser sounds a lot different than say like an import Korean laser that's 5 to 40 nanoseconds. It's way more acoustic. The snap is there, and it faded different straight away. So we were stoked. Like we could see the difference. The fades were better with better fading. We had better advertising, better marketing. People were coming to us for this laser, and we could treat colors, right? So it was a big thing for us. We're taking on a lot of color pieces. Soon realized the issue is the 694, it's good on light skin. So skin type 1 to 3. Once you start pushing past that, you start going into hypopigmentation territory. Not great for anything tanned. And the other issue is it's very, very slow. They run at like 2 hertz to maximum 3 hertz. But as you increase your energy, the hertz slow down. So like we were taking on some bigger pieces. Say you're doing a sleeve. I'm someone who treats all colors, like all colors individually. I treat my blacks individually, reds individual, and so on. So to do a full sleeve, running at, you guys all treat, I'm guessing, so running at 2 hertz a second, and then I think when you're actually pushing the power up, when you're faded with this laser, we were down to 1 hertz. And pushing 1 hertz a second is a very, very long treatment. We had people lined up in the waiting area. My wife likes to move things along and make sure all our bookings running on time, but I'd be sweating trying to do this treatment, and we're running at 1 hertz. It was taking me hours to get through color pieces. It wasn't viable for a business. And then a lot of the time, customers were coming back in after a few sessions. They weren't fading a lot from a ruby laser. not saying they don't work, they're just very, very, very slow on a lot of greens, blues, purples, things like that. So that was one of the hard things for us. It wasn't amazing in there. I was definitely looking for something better. Okay, and then what happened, I noticed with nanosecond technology, I love this laser and I've produced a lot of good, clean, full removals, and you'll see it in our gallery, but with heavily saturated tattoos or tattoos that are very deep, we were finding they would fade really good on the first early sessions. Nano kind of runs at the start, but as you get into your later sessions, they become quite faded. You start upping energy, you'll push down to the smaller spot sizes. You start to realize tattoos aren't fading very well. And sometimes we were getting up there in the sessions, I don't know whether it was 10 plus sessions, comparing images, and they were hardly fading, even though we were pushing sometimes the gaps out to 3 months, in 4 or 5 months gap to get maximum fading, they still weren't fading. So like we were worried that we're not going to produce full removals on a lot of tattoos with this laser. Nothing I seemed to do, changing energy, going back to big spot size, it just wasn't working. So I knew that there must be better, whether it is Pico technology that was going to answer that question, wasn't sure, but I knew there had to be something better. So at the time overseas, I'd read clinical studies on fractional lasers in conjunction with full removal treatments. So using the handpiece first and then using a fractional laser after, or some clinics were actually using fractional before, then throwing the 1064 on top, right? What I've seen is it gives better healing. The reason for this nanocrate generates a lot of heat in the skin, and you can get blistering after when you're working at those higher energies, or if you're leaning on the laser, which I used to do a little bit just to push fades, depending on where it is on the body. So no one wants blistering. We all don't want blisterings. Customer doesn't want blisterings. Not easy to look after. So I knew that the fractional handpiece actually pierces the skin. It creates channels and it allows heat to escape. So by doing so, we're going to give a better fade. But also what I was reading is possibly the collagen stimulation or the fractional laser is getting more depth out of it, and that will create more fading. So this particular laser, the Italian laser at the time, this was before anyone was doing fractional with these lasers. We spoke to the manufacturer, and they just released a fractional handpiece, but it was for skin rejuvenation, not for tattoo removal. So I asked them whether we could adapt it to our laser, and they actually made up a connection for our laser, changed the software. I started putting it in before or after tattoo removal, and what I found that it was definitely increasing the fading. Those deep tattoos that I was struggling with, I was starting to make progress, and we're actually starting to get some full removals by adding the fractional laser in. For me, I used to like to add it in last. I found if you add a fractional laser working at 1064 nanometer first, it frosts the ink, and then you put a full pass over the top. The response wasn't the same. I didn't like it. And those fractional lasers actually pierce the skin on the nano. So it's not like the PicoWay. We'll talk about that fractional later. It's not like that. It actually pierces the skin. If you turn it up to the right power, you can just pierce the skin, get a little bit of pinpoint bleeding. That allows heat to escape and you don't get blistering. So that was a big thing. But dressing, like aftercare, that sort of thing, takes a little bit more work because we do have pinpoint bleeding. From there, I started actually doing fractional only treatments on faded tattoos. So I'd take the full beam right out of it. I'd get customers to come in instead when they're very, very faded. I'd do 2, sometimes 3 passes, kind of just made up what worked. And I found just the perfect little recipe, like the 3 passes over most tattoos, high energy fractional, was actually finishing tattoos better than what the full handpiece was, better than working with a 3 mil or 4 mil handpiece. So that kind of answered those questions for a while, and I was pretty happy. But as time went on, I guess marketing came out. Everyone's talking about Pico lasers. All the good clinics, all the bigger clinics around the world are starting to use Pico lasers. Everyone's kind of talking, everyone's asking, we're getting a lot of inquiries, do you use Pico? When you say no and you say check the results, some people just still, they won't come to you because they want Pico. They hear Pico, it's the best there is. So we were kind of forced to. We kind of felt like we don't want to, but we have to, marketing wise, we have to stay with the top clinics. If we want to stay in that top, whatever it is, 5% around the world or whatever we're in, we have to go with Pico. But I thought, all right, I'm going to actually keep my nano laser and I'm going to use Pico as well. Now, from here it was a very hard choice. the first generation of Pico lasers was his first 755, which we all know what that is. The issue I seen with that one is the low energy. So it was like 165 to 200 millijoules from memory, right? We were working with a 1 joule nano system. So for me, like, it seemed so low. I know it was Pico energy, so it's different. You can't compare them. But we were finding we were getting a lot of clients in that it had the promises from these Pico lasers, the first gen, I'm not talking PicoWay, first gen, that were fading at first, but then they were coming to a standstill. They were getting up high in the treatments and they weren't doing anything. And some clinics were actually sending them to us to finish them off that actually had this first generation 755. So for me, it just didn't make sense. And then it's predominantly a 755, a straight 755 laser. They added the 1064 and the 532 handpieces, but you've got to look at the fact that it's a 200 millijoule laser. As soon as you bend 755 into 532, what's going to happen? We're left with virtually no energy, and we're pushed down, I believe they're like a 1.5 or 2 mil handpiece in a 532 and a 1064, which for tattoo removal, it doesn't work. There's no penetration, especially on a deep black tattoo, trying to work at those handpieces with no power. So for me, that one didn't make sense at all. I then looked at, I guess I was looking at everyone really. I was looking at all the specs of all the different lasers coming out. I was following everyone's Instagram. I was looking at everyone's before and after. And for me, it came down to, I guess, not just marketing and looking at specs. I wanted to see a single clinic that had produced, say, a handful, let's say 10 before and afters, clean before and afters of deep tattoos with that picosecond laser, to know that it can actually produce that. Because the old 755, probably 2-3 years into it, 5 years into it, most clinics were still using the manufacturer's before and after images, which is a worry, because you think, why aren't they producing their own before and afters after working with it for this long? So for me, that didn't make sense. Now, the other choice was the Italian laser I was with. They had a Pico, and I did like their technology. So I was thinking of upgrading, going with that. The issue there was they kept the ruby laser. So they went Pico with their 532, 1064, but they kept the ruby laser at 30 nanosecond. And for me, I was working with that for, I think we had it for 4 years. And the ruby laser just didn't make sense for me. There was no doubt that the first generation, okay, not PicoWay, the first generation 755 was better on blues and greens. So there's no argument. They were producing way better color removals. And I wanted to have a laser that could do that sort of thing. So it was either keep my nano laser, upgrade to the old 755, have 2 lasers, but then I'm running two lasers, and it doesn't fix the problem with the 1064 in the nano slowing down up top and not being able to produce those full removals. The fractional helped, but it still didn't really, it didn't on some tattoos produce what I was looking for. All right, so then I looked at PicoWay. PicoWay, I guess we were looking at PicoWay for a very, very long time. We went to a couple of their seminars. We spoke to their sales reps, Vera at the time, and had a lot of different conversations. But my worry was the PicoWay being 400 millijoules, so it's a lot more powerful than the first generation of Pico lasers, which is great. But I still was thinking, we've got a 1 joule nano, that's going backwards. There's not going to be enough power. And I was worried that on full removals, when you're working with deep ink, we were going to be pushed down to a tiny spot size, whether it be 3 mil, 2 mil, things like that, and we'd run out of energy. I thought, yeah, it's going to be great down low, and it may be good on colors, but it's going to struggle up top, and that's not going to fix the problem. So I did heaps of different research, and I looked at a lot of different clinics, and there was a few clinics overseas that were producing some amazing results with this PicoWay laser, and they'd had nano before. So I was watching their full removals come through, and they were generating a lot of full removals, very, very clean. If you zoomed up on skin looked good. So I contacted like one of these overseas that I was really following, and he was actually nice enough to give me a lot of good information on it, and he had nothing bad to say about it. Pretty much everything was good. He fixed my worry that you run out of energy. He said he never ran out of energy. He was never pushed down to a small spot size. And he said what happens is exactly the same thing that I felt. The nano was slowing down up top, and that's where he brings his PicoWay in, and his PicoWay was just carrying him through up top to full removals. And then he also said for cosmetic ink, it's 100 times better. It's night and day between it, right? The only issue he had, he didn't have a service contract in that country at the time. So he was paying for all his repairs. And as we know, Pico lasers, they are quite fragile. They are quite expensive to fix. So contact Candela, and they answered that question straight away, that they had a service contract available, a yearly service contract. Now, the number seems pretty high when you first look at that number. I guess a lot of you guys are already paying that, so you know what it is. But you do your numbers as a business, and when you know that for the whole year, you've got a certain number that's going to cost you to service your laser, to keep it up to spec at all times, all the repairs, everything included, it just makes sense. Like when you're pushing a laser hard all day, every day, mirrors wear out, things go wrong, stuff like that. So you've got to have a good service team. That's the most important thing for us. So that answers my question straight away. But the final, like the cherry on top, is right as we were inquiring, the 730 nanometer came out. And I looked at all the clinical studies on the 730, and the pulse width of, what was it, 250 picosecond on a 730, and what it was doing to blues and greens, we couldn't believe it. It kind of was everything we've been looking for. I was a little bit concerned that it still ran a handpiece, and I thought it was a dye handpiece in between, but I was quickly told that it's a crystal in between, so it's not a dye piece. It's not going to be consumable and run out. Like we did thousands of shots on ours. It was always good. So there was no problems there. So that answered the question, and we purchased our PicoWay, and that was the best thing we ever did for our business. It was easy changeover coming from like the Italian laser over to the Pico. I kept our Italian laser at first because my original plan was, I'd heard studies on nano for the first sessions. It kind of primes the ink, you get a better fade, then you throw Pico in later on. So we trialed that for a fair while. We kept our nano in the other room. We were using both of them, and we were trying that theory. But what I found is that the Pico was really doing well on early sessions. Like when it was very comparable, if not better in a lot of cases. Healing was better. We weren't getting blistering. We weren't using a fractional laser after to try and let the heat out. So there was less downtime, and it was just a nicer pulse to work with. So I kept them both for a while just to try that theory. I'm not saying it doesn't work. It does work for some people, and it may be different on different Pico pulses. I'm only saying this with PicoWay mixed with the Italian laser might be different on the others. But for me, it wasn't worth keeping both lasers. So like the PicoWay just answered all my questions. Everyone was happy with it. We got so many more inquiries from just having Pico, like exactly what I hoped would happen. And it's just so much nicer to work with. And so they're just the specs on there. Like before I buy a laser, I always look at the specs and what they do, like 400 millijoules, and then we're 450 picoseconds, which was very, very low compared to the first generation. Like we're talking about 755 before, that was like 550 to 750 picoseconds. So way more thermal compared to the PicoWay. So that's what I loved about it. And then you can't argue with the 730, 250 picosecond. We hadn't seen anything like it. So that works. So here, while we're talking about 730, I thought I'd just show you a few progress shots. On my Insta, we don't have a huge amount of color on there, being that we've got a lot of color pieces that are in the making, but they're not full removals right now. We don't really post stuff that's halfway through, but I thought I'd just show you what the 730 can do. These, like on the left-hand side, we'll look at the Pooh Bear one. Look at the green, look at the blue at the top, or the purple. When treating with ruby laser in the past, this was unheard of. You just never seen that result. The green would fade a little bit every time. It'd just be like a tiny little bit. You'd have to compare images to see it. That was after 2 sessions. So top one's 2 sessions. Look what it's done to the blues and the purples. Yes, we are treating all the other colors too, but that's only 2 sessions in. So we're a lot further along now, but you can see that like the ruby lasers were never producing that. So 730 just blew my mind. And then the hand down the bottom, that was one of the first green pieces we ever treated. I think we were one of the first. There was a few clinics with 730, not many in Australia to get it. So when we seen this and we did this, I think this is 1 session in on the hand there. Look what it's done to the green and blue. It just strips it. And again, over on the right side, on the thigh there, the OK. Look at the green and the blue, just gone. And that's one session, and that's typical for those sort of colors. Like they really like aquas, like those light aqua sort of greeny blues. Forest greens can be a bit harder because you've got a yellow content in there, so they can be a little bit slower. But what it can do off one session is just amazing. These are all with the big handpiece too, the 4mm, so the biggest handpiece it comes with. I find that you can't waste the 4mm handpiece. The best fades are definitely achieved with that larger 4mm spot size. So you need to throw it in early to see the best results. I find that any tattoo who's been treated elsewhere, say with a ruby laser, or even somewhere that's gone over with a 1064, they've taken the top layer out. For whatever reason, whatever it does to it, they never fade as well when you throw 730, and you never get these sort of fades straight away. They're always when you throw it in early. So for me, like I always treat all my colors first session, everything's treated properly with every wavelength. It does the best. The difference between nanosecond and picosecond, I guess in the real world, like there's so much hype around picosecond marketing, and then nanosecond clinics with nanoseconds saying that picoseconds, you know, like they run out of energy, they can't fade tattoos, pico's better on color, blah, blah, blah. It's, I guess, until you work with both, you don't really realize the differences. Nano's definitely very, very capable, and we loved it for years, but nano has a lot more thermal energy. It's a lot hotter, the pulse, so we have negative side effects. More so, blistering happens more often, and the blisters are deeper on a nano laser. If you get a few blisters and they're shallow on a pico, they heal very nicely. They're just a different blister, okay? We're obviously always trying to avoid that, but sometimes they do happen. With pico laser, as soon as I threw the pico laser in, what I soon realized is those tattoos that we were talking about before that were quite stubborn, that weren't fading very well, straight away, as soon as I put in a pico pulse, it was like we'd done 3 or 4 treatments from a nano. It just ran up top. I always say a PicoWay runs up top. It doesn't slow down. So if your removal is being a little bit slow at the start, be patient, because as soon as the tattoo starts fading, it will run up top and it will carry you all the way to a full removal. Nothing else needed. And it will do so without creating hyperpigmentation, which you do get a lot from nano lasers, especially being on Gold Coast. We treat a lot of tan skin, olive skin, dark skin, but people are in the sun all the time. We treat right the year round. With a nano laser, the risk of getting hyper or hypopigmentation is very high. We suffer a lot from it. And there was no, with nano lasers, you couldn't break down the hyperpigmentation like you can with the pico. If you get a bit of hyperpigmentation, the pico can just knock that out very, very easily. So it's just much nicer and friendlier to treat with. You find that they don't hurt as much. Anyone who's had a nano and then they've had a pico will realize the pico doesn't hurt as much. Yeah, they still hurt, ink shattering hurts, but they don't feel the same. And also nano pulse always hurts after for longer. Sometimes, like I used to treat with both the pico and nano in different spots on the body, the nano would always sting for like days after. It just had a different feel to it. So in the real world, pico runs up top. Nano may be able to match a pico down low sometimes in early sessions, but the only way you achieve that is by leaning on the nano. What I mean by that is just upping energy, using high energy. A lot of clinics do that, and it does create good fades, but we don't want those negative side effects. I want all my customers to heal really nicely. And at the end of the removal, we want perfect skin. We don't want any marks. So pico will definitely do that for you. So marking's fantastic with a pico. Everyone's asking for pico now. You need to have it, and it just treats better. There's no argument. Otherwise, I would have kept my nano and used both, but just really didn't see the reason for it. The impact it had on our business, hard for me to put a number on it, because we introduced our PicoWay right as COVID come in. So like we were shut down for a long time. People couldn't get tattoo removal up here in Queensland. So we came back with the pico lasers. So as everyone knew, like it was super quiet, no one could get removals or anything like that. But as soon as we returned, we were busier than we'd ever been. We did huge numbers that we'd never even seen before. But I can't put a number on it because it could have been, it definitely hasn't impacted the COVID disaster and all the rest of what happened there. So, but it definitely changed our business. We get so many more inquiries asking for a pico laser. They see we're using a pico laser, they Google it, they find PicoWay and they come to us for that reason. So for a professional point of view, I think it does really change your business, as well as all the good stuff we talked about before, treating wise. All right, handpieces wise, this it excels here too. Like the Zoom 1064 goes all the way up to a 10 millimeter spot size, and those big spot sizes are just, there's nothing better than using like bigger spot sizes for tattoo removal. Like in early sessions, they do such a better job and they're much more gentle on the skin. Personally, I don't use 10 mil much. I usually use somewhere between about 7 and 8 mil on my early sessions, but I try and push my largest spot sizes as long as possible. I'll only go down to small spot sizes if I'm forced to, because I just don't, I would prefer to, if I can produce a full removal out of big spot sizes, I'll do it every time. The skin always looks nicer healed, less risk of side effects, and it's just a better way to treat. For me anyway, that's how I treat. I didn't purchase my PicoWay with the 785. The 730 had just come out, so we made a choice between the two of them. So I've always run the 730. I don't feel like I guess I need the 785. It may be better on forest greens and stuff like that. I don't use it, so I couldn't tell you too much about it. But the 730 for me, it's one of the best handpieces. You can do so much with it, as well as everyone who treats skin would know how good it is on those dark skin types and what you can get away with. The 730 on colors, we treat like olive skins, like really tan, dark skins with the 730, blues, greens, all those sort of colors that you would never think you could treat colors on, and they fade well and they don't get hypo. As long as they're good afterwards, we coach them through. They treat really well. It blew my mind that you can actually treat some of these dark skins with a 730. I think just the 250 picosecond pulse makes all the difference. It's like you realize when you start working with these low number pulse widths, how much better they are than the high numbers. So for me, I love that. With the Resolve 532, one of my favorite handpieces too, use it all the time for skin rejuvenation, but sorry, I skipped one, but the Resolve 532 I don't have, sorry. The Resolve Fusion is what we're talking about, the 532. Now, use it for skin all the time, but off-label, the 532 Fusion is very, very capable for tattoo removal, all right? I learned this back when we were using fractional lasers with the 1064, that you can finish tattoos with it, that sort of thing. The reason I use Resolve Fusion for tattoo removal is on dark skins, like skin types 4s, things like that, tan skins where you wouldn't want to put a zoom, I guess, even like a 4 millimeter zoom, lowest energy, sometimes they still hypo from this. You find if you move to Resolve Fusion, you're very gentle with the Resolve Fusion, you can actually start to treat these tan skin reds without getting hypopigmentation. Just being in that fractional mode and the donut in the middle, how it works, it actually still removes tattoos very, very well. And today, like I've done a fair few, I've done a lot in the past actually, but today we just produced our first full removal only using Resolve Fusion. Okay, on a very, very tan client on her arm. I'll post that on our Insta tomorrow. We'll post it up and put little comments about it, but that was all Resolve Fusion. So there's a little trick in there that can be used. And then the Resolve 1064, I use that quite a lot. Look, we use it for skin. You guys know about skin already. So I use it for tattoo removal quite a bit on scarred skin. So whether it be tattoo scarring or scarring from other things, so about bad blistering or things like that, where they've got some scarring in there. What happens with scarring if clinics are too aggressive in early treatments, cause bad blistering, their blisters aren't managed, they're popped, they start to form scar tissue, it encapsulates the ink. So someone being too aggressive on a first treatment actually hinders the whole removal process. It looks impressive, like you go, wow, look how much ink's come out. But when you look closely, there's scar tissue all through the lines are standing out, and we've got scar tissue over the ink. Once scar tissue comes over the ink, it encapsulates it. Then we go to treat it with a pico. It doesn't matter how good your laser is. It doesn't break down. It gets stuck in the scars. And a lot of the time those scars become a hot point and they blister again. Once they blister again, then you get issues with, scar tissue growing, things like that, or just not fading. If you throw Resolve in, for me, I like to throw it in last. So I treat with Zoom first, then I will throw Resolve in. I don't do it on the early treatments usually. I wait till the tattoo's a little bit faded, and then I will throw Resolve in on top of the Zoom, and I find it starts to break down the scar tissue, and it gives us a nicer fade as well as the collagen stimulation. You just see the difference in smoothness. The skin starts to look nicer, fresher. Everyone's happy and the tattoo starts to fade. As you move along with that removal, you kind of match the energy with the Resolve to where you are on the treatment. So obviously we wouldn't throw in super high Resolve too early because it's got to match where you are. So I kind of match it, make sure we're not putting in too much energy. And then you can also, if you wanted to, use the Resolve like I talked about with the Q-switch laser on the Nano. You could use it by itself on a scar tattoo in between treatments if you wanted to start to break down the scar tissue. And the bonus is it's a 1064. It's going to target those ink. You usually get a little bit more depth out of the Resolve. So you start to get quite a good fade as well as breaking down scar tissue. So it's something that you really need to throw in with tattoo removal on those scar tattoos that we see a lot of. Here's one straight away. Everyone, I don't know, everyone that watches our Insta, it's been shared around quite a lot, is Ethan's story. Ethan's probably one of the heaviest tattoo removals that we've encountered. We've done heaps of face tattoos and we always have, but when Ethan came in, this was different. This was heavily saturated. You look at the right side, it was so much thick line work underneath. Then Ethan put the blackout over the top, and then he added some whites into there. There's a lot of white work on top of the blacks, which causes issues. As we all know, white's titanium-based reflective. It's very hard to remove and sometimes has an oxidizing issue. So it was a tricky removal. He's also done a lot of scarification. If you look at, or if you stalk his Insta profile, if you go right through, you'll see some of the crazy stuff he's done. He's actually used a soldering iron on his cheeks. There's a honeycomb pattern underneath on both sides of those cheeks where they tried to remove some of the tattoo with a soldering iron. So they've caused a lot of scarring underneath there. And then he's had scarification throughout his entire face, bits and pieces. So this one wasn't just a tattoo removal. It was trying to work and improve the scars as we went. I knew it was going to be a challenging case, but it's been one of the most rewarding cases we've done so far. If you watch our Insta, you'll see like kind of the progress. We haven't put like some final shots up. We're nearly there, but being that there's a lot of white on the right-hand side, it's been a little bit difficult, a little bit oxidizing issues. And some of the scar tissue is just hanging on to the ink, but we're using fractional lasers after all our Zoom passes to try and break it down. His skin's getting better and better and better. It's hard to believe. If you look at the bottom photo, the second one in, you'll see the left-hand side is the untreated. That's a nice fresh skin that's nearly clear. That's had so much Zoom Resolve over the top that his skin's like glowing. All his pores are shrank. He's looking good, looking beautiful. But the right side has just been treated. So if you look carefully, you might have to zoom that picture up. But look at all the bruising and things like that. When you're treating your last treatments and someone's so faded like that, you do get a lot of bruising on the skin. You get a lot of erythema. It's not scarring. It's not bleeding under there. It's just erythema. Pico lasers generate lots of energy. They look a little bit harsh the day after, but give it 3, 4, 5 days and he's looking good again. And then I think we're about 10 sessions in on Ethan so far, and we're very, very close. The nose is cleared, forehead nearly cleared, and left side's pretty much clear. So looking forward to producing that full removal, which shouldn't be too far away. And then I'll just take through a few of our before and afters. Like I said, we do a lot of face tats. Every ink's so different. Everyone always asks us how many sessions it's going to take to remove tattoo. How many is mine going to take? And everyone looks on your before and afters. They find one similar to theirs, and they pretty much add up their own sessions of what it's going to take. Is mine going to be 5? Is mine going to be 6? Everyone hopes for the best, but it's just like you just can't tell. Some inks just come out really good. Like on the left-hand side, Corey, that was pretty thick black ink, but it lifted really, really well along that jawline. That was 5 sessions to a complete removal, which is rare. And like I never tell a customer that it's going to take 5 sessions because it's very, very rare. A lot of the time it goes out well beyond that, but it was just one of those lucky cases. The ink was right. We could push it pretty hard at a certain rate, and we did well. The skin came out perfect. On the right side, that Mike Tyson tat, the big story to that one, that is actually a night out in Bangkok. He actually woke up with his tattoo, literally, after a big night. He's not the sort of person that wanted a Mike Tyson tat, obviously. So we pushed this pretty hard, close together. The sessions were quite close, like 8 weeks apart for a fair while, because he wanted it off. But 12 sessions later, we threw in a lot of Resolve towards the later sessions just to try and clean up the skin because there was quite a bit of scarring underneath just from when that tattoo was applied. But if you look pretty closely, these aren't edited, there's no filters. That's pretty much, your skin's better than that now. It's pretty much come back to perfect. So that was Pico, and just persistence came out like it was never there. So it's kind of cool doing these face tattoo removals, just rewarding, seeing the change in people, being able to watch it happen. On the left-hand side, it doesn't look like it, but that's actually very dark, a dark sort of olive skin. It's just the light makes it look a little light, but that was a full 3/4 sleeve with the chest piece on there. That's, you can look at the sort of result that the PicoWay can produce. No scarring whatsoever, no pigment lost. Everything was perfect. It looks like he's never had a sleeve on there. So like, to be able to produce that sort of work now with the Pico lasers we got, it's just amazing. It's life-changing to be able to do that. It looks like you can look up close and you just can't find anything. And then the one on the right, anyone who knows me knows that's my tattoo. So that was a Chicano sleeve that we spoke about back in the start that I wanted to get, I was dying to get. Look, I had it 5 years, I loved it. Styles were changing, tattoos were getting better, and I was looking to get more tattoos and just didn't want this mismatched tattoo. My wife didn't like this tattoo. Obviously, if you look close, you'll see why. She didn't like what was on my arm. So I had to go. For a business point of view, we thought if we we're still learning at that stage too, so we wanted to, I guess, learn the ropes, learn what worked, what didn't work. We tried a lot of wrong things on my arm to see different techniques, but my arm came out really good, actually. I healed really nicely, luckily enough. And there's pretty much no marks on my arm. It's a full removal. I tidied it up with the PicoWay. Like, we started that with nano lasers, and I just tidied it up with the PicoWay just for those last little bits, but it's come out really good, and it's the best thing we did for a business, being able to like show what the lasers are capable of, because a lot of people question removals in your images, saying, are they Photoshop? That's not real. Can't be the same person, blah, blah, blah. So by having that, and they can see it in person, they can touch your skin, it's just it's really good to have. So that was a cool process. And I think being a laser operator, being able to like go through the process and know the pain your clients are in, what areas hurt and how they heal and all those sort of things, it makes a big difference. People feel much more comfortable in your hands. But I treat everyone else's skin exactly the same as I treat my skin. Like, I take pride in every removal to make sure it is perfect, because we want perfect skin. We don't want any marks. So patience and time, taking time to do everything properly is key. Over on the left side, the 730, that's 730 again. Those blues and greens used to be a nightmare for when we were working with the nanotechnology. Half time they would fade a little bit, but you'd never just get those full removals. Just super hard. Like, we're 730, 6 sessions, took that out like it was never there. Even after 3, it was hardly anything left in there. So it just proves what the 730 is capable of. And like I said, we've got a lot more color pieces on the go that aren't complete, because they've got a lot of reds, orange, purples in there and stuff that we're still fading. So we'll be able to throw a lot more up in time once we get through. This back piece, Adrian over here, this was a big one. Like, doesn't show it in the photos, but if you look at the England and you look at the crowns down the center there, they were super thick. A lot of scar tissue in there. Whoever tattooed the centerpiece in the England scarred that in really bad. So the side pieces came out very, very easily. We probably had a full removal in about half that, 4 or 5 sessions. And then it came down to just working on the middle England and those crowns. Now, they wouldn't budge without using a fractional laser. They just weren't moving. There's too much scar tissue involved in there. But by throwing Resolve in on those treatments and starting to break down the scar tissue, we slowly plowed our way through and then produced a full removal. There's a few skin irregularities in there if you look very, very closely, but it got better with time, and it's pretty much full removal. So he was stoked with that one. On the left-hand side, again, 730. Now, this one, not saying nano doesn't work and nothing against ruby lasers, but it had 12 sessions with a ruby laser on this tattoo and just stopped fading. We're doing session after session. The blue wasn't fading. It was getting to a light point, but it just wasn't doing anything. We were forced down to such a small spot size on the nano, on the ruby, because we ran out of energy. And working at that 2 and 3 mil, it just wasn't moving. Nothing was happening. It's frustrating when you're working with that sort of stuff. We brought the 730 nanometer in, and one session in, and it just blew the rest of it blew away, just gone. So it's crazy what it is capable of. Until you work with it, you won't realize how good it is. Amazing wavelength. Stars on the neck. This one I just threw in there just because everyone asks how many sessions am I going to take. Now, if I looked at this, or Georgia does all about quoting. I don't really do quoting and that sort of thing. But if I looked at it and got asked how many sessions it's going to take, you'd probably say, anywhere from 6 to 12 sessions, I guess. Fairly thick. Neck has good circulation, so yes, circulation is key, but it doesn't always go that way. So we always say kind of worst case scenario, maybe at the top end. But 2 sessions in with a big gap, there was a big gap in between, so it might have been a year since we've seen her. But those starts just faded away. Now, it's just that some inks do this. It's inks and a good laser, obviously. It's got to be a good laser. It's got to be treated right, but treated right with some time in between, you can produce some pretty crazy removals. This is my personal trainer and George's personal trainer, Rick. We've done heaps for Rick. I've actually lasered Rick's full back. If you look on our Instagram, you'll see Rick's, actually I haven't posted it yet. We'll post it shortly. We did his full back. He's got a very, very big back, and it's a massive Japanese piece that we faded back, and he's got a new tattoo. But we started off by doing his tummy and ribs. On the left-hand side, that's that black ink down there, that's fully removed. It looks like it wasn't there. It just came out beautifully. You find athletes fade very, very fast. Rick was like a pro athlete bodybuilder. They fade just crazy fast. Their system works so well in a lot of cases. They're so pure, lots of water and everything they're doing and cardio and stuff like that. They fade amazingly well. So always really good to work with. But the crazy one was the right hand. I did both ribs. The other ribs is the same pretty much. But right hand ribs, I didn't get to Rick in time before he re-tattooed the side of it. So those little black stripes were put in after, and they're not to cover anything. There was nothing to cover. There was no scars, nothing like that. But you look at that whole rib piece with all the reds, yellows, oranges, all the crazy colors in there. We pretty much produced a full removal. I wish I got to it before he put those stripes in, because we'd be able to see right back what was there. But that was one of the craziest removals. So we did both left and right ribs exactly the same as that. Then we did his full back. So went through a lot with Rick. And also gone back there. He'd been elsewhere. He'd been to a lot of different laser clinics before, so he knew laser. After coming to us and then experiencing what it was like on a good laser and working with the PicoWay, he was blown away. Like, the healing was totally different. He used to get really bad blisters. He'd be healing for weeks and just have a lot of nightmares and the pain. But when he actually got introduced to the PicoWay, the healing was so good. The pain was different. Total different experience. If you've been there and worked with those nano lasers, you just don't understand. So that's all for tattoo removal. So we'll go on questions after any questions, but I do a little bit of skin as well. We've always done skin. We used to work with IPLs back in the start, so we did a lot of skin rejuvenation with that, and we learned our way with that. But when we got introduced to the Pico laser, it kind of changed things so much for us, as in what we do with like the Pico facials. We became very, very popular with skin rejuvenation in the Pico facials, as in what you can do with the Resolve Fusion handpiece mixed with the Zoom, even the 730. I guess you can produce in one treatment what would take six treatments with some of the other devices we were working with. And people were coming back with, it looks like they've got a filter. Like, you look on the one on the left-hand side, if you look up close, this probably can't zoom up on here, but they look like they're coming with their filter. It looks like they're coming with makeup. You go to take the photo and try and wipe the makeup off it. There's nothing. Pores have shrunk, tone, texture changed. All the freckles are gone. And yeah, it's just amazing what you can achieve in one treatment. That was free just to get it to that stage, but pretty much had porcelain skin. And same with the right-hand side. If you zoom up on those pictures, you'll see like how the skin tone textures change as well as the pigment. So people even who don't have pigment anymore come in regularly, they get the pico facials because they like the brightness, the tone texture change. People see the change. They ask them what they've got. They send their friends in. They send their family in. So it's one of those treatments that like just the recommendations are crazy from it. Same thing on the left-hand side. With all of these treatments, I did Zoom. I usually spot treat with Zoom like pretty intensively with 532. So I spot treat all the browns and then I throw Resolve Fusion over the top, maybe 3, sometimes 4 passes, entire face to produce those sort of results. On the right-hand side, the Asian skin, the dark skin types, which we see a lot of, having a pico laser, you tend to get a lot of inquiries from that clientele. And a lot of clinics won't treat this skin type because it's a tricky skin type, as we know. It's not the easiest to understand and it can go south very, very easily. But you find with the pico, like it's very forgiving. So like with this one on the right, I use 730 nanometer to take out like all the freckles around the eye, under the cheeks, and then also straight over the top with the Resolve Fusion, lower energy, but you find you can use your Resolve Fusion even on these darker skin types. And I've never had hypo issues or anything from Resolve Fusion. So it's pretty crazy what you can do with it. The other thing I've got to throw in there with the difference between nano and picosecond, I'm still working it out now. When you're in tattoo removal game, you want the best phase, but you also want the best heal. But what I've found with pico laser, you don't have to rely on energy. Sometimes a big spot size, low energy, can produce as good a fade as a higher energy pass, and it doesn't have any negative side effects. Happy customer, they come in like there was no downtime, a little bit of swelling, that's it, nothing. And the fade can be really good. If you find that right power levels on those bigger spot sizes and you use those bigger spot sizes right through, you don't have to rely on energy. So you don't have to push those power levels up and then be laying in bed wondering, I hope I didn't overstep the line. I hope this client's going to heal well. The Pico Pulse does the work for you. Rely on that Pico Pulse. When you're working with those low picosecond pulses, they do the work. You don't have to. You don't have to push them hard. You can push them when the tattoo is faded. You push them up top. You start to run, and Pico will run and it will carry you through. But don't be aggressive down low because it just can create negative side effects and ruin someone's chances of a full removal, which we all don't want. So that's about it. If you guys got any questions, feel free to reach out or reach out to our Insta. I'm always around. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your journey into tattoo removal and the tips and tricks that you've picked up along the way. It's always so wonderful to see someone's passion come through, especially for this industry. And I'm sure that everyone listening will have a lot to take away. Before we move into the Q&A, I would like to remind everyone, if you haven't yet asked your question, to please do so now. For our first question this evening, what do you do when tattoo ink oxidizes? Do you keep treating?
Tricky one. It's one of the hardest things. For me, in my experience, there's no set recipe for oxidized ink, as in sometimes it does respond, sometimes it doesn't. There's a lot of, I guess, hyper marketing out there that people will crack the formula for oxidized ink. It's always difficult. Yes, sometimes I still will treat, but I'm very, very low in energy. Oxidized ink doesn't like high energy. So don't bother trying to push the energy up. You're not going to fade it like a black ink. It's not a black ink. It's a white oxidized ink. It's titanium-based reflective. So yeah, I do still treat, because a lot of the times the problem is that throughout a sleeve, say you do a full sleeve and the sleeve's going good, has some whites in there, you try and step around them as much as possible. Sometimes not always possible to avoid them. And sometimes they don't even oxidize at the start. They oxidize later. you start to get that grey. You always get like a little bit of like a hint that it's coming. It goes a bit grey, it goes a little bit blue. Just got to be quick to act on that and don't put energy over those colours. Try and avoid it. Sometimes I can find a recipe of low energy, lightly treated time in between, and it does help. But sometimes with the cosmetic inks, yeah, if they're going to oxidize on the brows, it can be a very long road to try and fade them. Every now and again you get lucky, but I can't say that I've got the exact recipe. They still are hard.
What spot size do you favour for black ink removal?
Always, I vary my spot sizes a lot, but I usually work between a 8mm or a 7mm. For me, that's just, I guess I found the best phase with those sort of spot size, and I like the clearance they do, and I'll push them as long as possible. If it's something like very, very light shading or stuff, like sometimes play with like the big one, like 10mm and stuff like that, but I don't use it a lot.
Do you have any experience using a fractional laser before using PicoWay for tattoo removal?
Yeah, I have tried it. The issue is I tried it with my nano laser, right? So, like I went back to before, if you throw a 1064 nanometer fractional laser in before you treat, the fractional laser frosts the ink, right? So it's already started frosting the ink. It plays, so that's going to change when you come over with a zoom, the response you're going to get. When you're playing with fractional energy, does anyone know exactly what energy is going to, I guess, move over to what it does with the zoom? Really don't know, so I never like to throw a fractional laser in first. Maybe you could do it that way, but I've always thought better off treating with zoom first, throw fractional laser afterwards, depending what you're trying to achieve. But if you're trying to achieve letting heat out, I think after works better. But with the resolve, I don't usually throw it in. All right. Nano fractional used to pierce the skin, and they used to allow it to open up, and we also used to use micro needling over the top to produce the same result because it lets the heat out. But I found with the Pico Resolve, if you put that on after, it doesn't break the skin, so it doesn't do anything for the healing side. Does that make sense?
If you have a cosmetic tattoo removal and it turns pink and they have a darker skin type, how would you treat that?
Depending on the skin tone, how dark it is, but I still find if you're very, very gentle with the 532 on cosmetic ink because it's so thin, you can still get away, but you just got to be very respectful of the melanin. Don't be aggressive. 532, even though it's Pico energy, is very, very aggressive on dark skin. So you need to be very, very low on energy, and then they need to be very, very good with their sun exposure after in the following months. But yeah, you can still do it for sure. You could, if you wanted to, you could try the Resolve Fusion because that's going to be much softer on there if you want to go down that road. As long as it doesn't oxidize on your test plate, it should be fine.
If you are combining Resolve, do you use Resolve 1064 before or after Zoom?
After for me, or it can be used standalone.
Would you ever use Resolve 532 or Fusion?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I do use Resolve 532 Fusion, and we've produced our first full removal with Resolve 532 Fusion on a red butterfly on a very, very tan gel that I'll hopefully post it tomorrow on our Insta. You'll be able to check it out. But that was there was no zoom in there. It was just straight Resolve Fusion. So yes, it can remove tattoos.
How do you treat tattoos on mucous membranes, such as the inner lips?
I don't really treat inner lips. 532, not that we can't. Just with the nano laser in the past, we had a few oxidized situations, so we don't treat the red on lips for that reason. Inside the lips, if it's just normal tattoos, a lot of lettering and stuff like that inside the lips, they treat perfectly and they heal really good. So no different to any other tattoo.
Do you use tattoo removal patches?
We don't. We played with them before, but we don't know. Didn't see any benefit, and I don't like the theory of it. We tried the R20 method years ago, back when Nano came out with his R20 method, saying it was going to be so amazing. with the 3 to 4 passes, but everything we did was negative. It just didn't show any better passes. So, no, I wasn't in the patches.
What tattoos would you use multiple passes for?
Multiple passes, I don't do multiple passes. I touch up a lot. I mean, I might overlap quite a bit, but that's only to make sure everything's responded. But I never do multiple passes unless I'm using the Resolve. If I'm using Resolve or Resolve Fusion, yes, I do multiple passes.
That's all we have time for this evening. I want to thank Nate again for sharing all of his experience with us, and I want to thank you all for joining us. Good evening, everyone.
Thanks, guys.